today, Elon Musk or,
Yeah.
whomever, want to take everything from us and poison our communities
Mm.
to pad their own profits.
Yeah.
Having our children need universal inhalers is a choice we don't need to keep making. We can decide where our power in our communities goes. And we can reject these data centers that want to take from us in order to destroy us.
Welcome to Computer Says Maybe. My name's Alix Dunn, and in this episode interview conversation, I'm going to be speaking with Anat Shenker-Osorio, who is going to pronounce her name better than me, who is kind of like a messaging guru on all things progressive communications, and is someone who I turn to better understand how we can articulate what it is we want, but also where there are galvanizing messages we can use to get more people interested and engaged in issues we care about. And we are going to be talking about all of the narrative challenges that AI presents. It is abstract, it is overwhelming, it can sometimes feel inevitable and disorienting because we're receiving so many mixed messages and there's not many places for us to process how we're feeling about these technologies, which means it's a really difficult terrain to figure out how to navigate communication and messaging, especially if you're trying to build power in these new eras of these new technologies. I'm excited to dig in on some tactics, but also some analysis on what types of issues we might turn to or look back at that can help us understand what we can do in this moment and how we can be more effective in the way that we include everyday people in these conversations that kind of tend to be pretty elite. And that is, I think, blocking a lot of the political possibility of using this moment where everybody's talking about AI, everybody's concerned, everybody's activated, and we just have to find a way to help them understand how to take some of that power back and connect with other political possibilities in this moment. I listen to your podcast and encourage everybody else also to listen to it because it's a really specific and structured way of taking particular issues where there have been victories, which I think is like, in this moment, I feel like looking at those victories is really important because I think it is possible. And in fact, you say a lot that it's like common and something we don't actually recognize, that like the left is actually good at like winning. We just don't remember or something. So do you want to talk a little bit about the show and like how you got interested in trying to help the left see and analyze wins so that it can better inform how its tactics moving forward work?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me
Yeah.
and for setting out such a tiny little small thing for us to talk about. This feels very chill,
Yeah.
very excited.
No pressure. There's no
Just gonna
pressure.
basically share my favorite recipe. We'll be
Yeah.
done. So, one of my core messaging edicts, and I have many because try to make things easy to understand, digestible, memorable, is say what you're for, say what you're for. And I will often joke that I can boil down all of progressive messaging to 3 sentences. Boy, have I got a problem for you. This is the Titanic. Would you like to buy a ticket? And we're the losing team. We lose a lot. We lost recently, so you should join us. And shockingly, by the way, that's going to come back up when we start talking about AI messaging.
I'm already noticing
like
some patterns in my own communication.
Hit the trifecta. Well done.
Yeah.
Making me look honest
Yeah.
and accurate. So it turns out that boy, have I got a problem for you is not that effective for most people. It works for activists. Activists, a new problem is their love language and they're very excited about it. But most normal people, even ideologically aligned people, got 99 problems and they don't want yours. So winning campaigns say what they're for, say what they're for, say what they're for. So super simple example, in Australia, where I work frequently, we were able to alter a policy that the government had pursued from 2001 until 2016 of shunting people seeking asylum to offshore prisons and have 4 sequential wins in a single year, 2016, after a large-scale research project to shift the messaging at the end of 2015 and close many of those camps and bring people there. And the message was not end this, stop that, don't do this, we can't have that, but rather bring them here. That was one of the campaigns. Another was let them stay. If you think about iconic slogans like Black Lives Matter is an affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a stop killing us. It's not a end police brutality. Of course, that's like vital and critical and important, but the idea itself is an affirmation. So
Mhm.
basically, here I am going around being like, say what you're for, say what you're for. If you want people to come to your party, throw a better party. And like the left does not like to throw a good party. We are like miserableism. We all grew up listening to the Smiths, or at least some of us did. And like, we're not a good time a lot of the time. And here I was doing presentations in which I would do what I just did now, which was, look at this terrible message. It's so bad. Why did you say this? Look at this terrible message. It's so bad. And I recognized that I was not following my own counsel, that my message about messaging was frequently about deconstructing what was not working.
Interesting.
And so I finally internalized that if I really do mean it, that it is more effective to persuade and mobilize people, like voting populations in respective jurisdictions, by saying what we're for and by painting the beautiful tomorrow and by making ourselves the winning team. Then what was this hypocrisy that I was doing where I would talk to activists and advocates and campaign managers and party leaders, and I wasn't following my own advice. So I disciplined myself to make a podcast called Words to Win By, which is about campaigns we've won all around the world and how we did it. And so in a lot of the episodes, and there's a couple that sort of break form, I'll be honest, but for the most part, there's no dramatic tension, right? Like the episode begins, we're going to win. That's what's going to happen at the end. But kind of like a Marvel movie, you also know that the good guys are going to beat the bad guys at the end, right? Guys, gender neutral. And you tune in to see how they'll do it, not if they'll do it. And so, yeah, almost every episode is basically looking at what was the strategy, what was the messaging, what were the arguments internal to the campaign, where some people wanted to message it in this way, other people disagreed. How did we reconcile that? What was the research that we did? And so on.
Yeah, there's a lot there that's so interesting because I'm immediately trying to apply all of that advice in the context of AI because I feel like it's something. I mean, taking a step back, I think one of the reasons that the space does feel difficult is because there is this industry centrality to all of the stories we're being told. And I think that it's interesting because now I'm not only thinking about the ways that I introduce this problem as a problem, but also how effective industry is at introducing it as this panacea solution for everything. And so I'm thinking about like when PR of companies is like, you don't want to cure cancer? We're going to cure cancer. It's going to be amazing. Like, isn't that going to be incredible? And it's like, oh, but I thought the problem was that you're peddling, knowingly not very good technology on a consumer base that doesn't want it while building like one of the biggest pieces of physical infrastructure that humanity has ever built that is extremely energy intensive at a time when we need to be like, fighting the climate crisis. And I feel like their ability to turn it to this speculative, positive vision is one of the biggest strengths that they've exhibited. And they've obviously put a lot of money behind it, but it's also a technique that is really impressive and consistent. And you see it anytime one of the CEOs talks about the technology is it's not today and like the kind of annoying things that don't yet work. It's this like really beautiful future that you can't quite imagine. It's going to be incredible. And we're stewards of that incredible future, even though at the same time they're handmaidens of something much probably darker that we're tempted to talk about or challenge them with. So are there corollaries you can think of in other spaces where a villain or a part of the problem is capable of doing using the technique that you just described? I'm kind of curious.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Like what?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a perfect analogy because what they're peddling is a very, very, I mean, not very old, but it's fairly old. It's like Industrial Revolution on, so therefore old now. But I think that there are a lot of parallels to the problem of fossil fuels and climate change and how all of that went down, if you'll let me unpack.
Please
And
do.
again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but so if you actually watch, if you subject yourself to Chevron commercials,
That's so true. Yes, carry on.
or Texaco commercials or
Yeah.
BP commercials, now, but in the past as well. It's like your future pumped, like powering your future, the energy to bring
Yeah.
you where you
Yeah.
want to go.
Yeah.
We're taking you places. Look at this grid. We have the engineering for the future.
Yeah.
We're going to own the future. And, there's a really, really old ad from one of these. I don't remember what it was. Like when I say old, I mean like 1950s. That was put a tiger in your tank. And it was like, I can see the image. It's Cialdini, who is a really seminal psychologist who wrote the book Influence, and then he wrote the book Persuasion. It's a lot of really, really important ideas about like how persuasion works. And put a tiger in your tank, whichever gas company had that old ad, was really about like, what is this metaphor we're trying to give you around this particular product that, you're newly-ish gonna buy. New because this was when the advent of the personal vehicle was like more rare, right? Because there was an era, I mean, obviously predates me, I wasn't around for it, but like where not everybody had a car, where cars per se as a technology were maybe not brand new. Like, I mean, there was an era where cars were brand new, but the kind of increase, and the same thing with personal computers, and the same thing with cell phones, and the same thing with cell phones that were not flip phones. I think that they've always been sold as like power unlimited, the future unleashed, like putting everything in your hands that is going to be like magical and delicious. And with climate, I don't know if you know this, but do you remember, are you old enough to remember famously calculating your own carbon footprint?
I mean, I remember the calculators and the encouragement to yes.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, in the olden times, when we used to have phones at our houses and they stayed there, you could go online, early internet, and you could put in like, I live in this many square feet or square meters, and like I drive this often and I fly this often, and it would give you your carbon footprint. Do you know who invented the carbon footprint?
It must be a fossil fuel company.
It 100% was. Because what that was a way for people to feel like, okay, I am worried about this, because they figured out they couldn't completely quash people's like concerns. And Rachel Carson's Silent Spring was like very old. Like there were already kind of early indicators that there were going to be problems with this thing, and that we were in fact cooking ourselves alive in a way that was probably not going to work out too well. And so rather than just fully quash it, they did multiple things at once. One of the things that they did was they made up this thing that you could do. And it's a little bit like the toy you get at children's birthday party, where you put your fingers in, and the more you pull,
the more stuck you get.
The more stuck you get. And the only way to get your fingers out is to push them together. So they were like, let's keep them occupied. Let's give them something to do so that they feel like they're doing something about this climate change thing, because some of them just keep wanting to be upset about this. We can't stop all of them from being upset. And so like, let's do light bulbs, or let's do recycling, or let's do, and I'm not knocking like better light bulbs or recycling or electric cars or solar panels. Like it's great if, your finances allow that. But they reduced climate change to a matter of individual consumer behavior. Because if you can get people in that little finger trap, then they are not organizing to contest for power. So that's one thing they did. The next thing that they did, and this is really where like I desperately hope that folks in your community learn from this.
I'm listening.
They forced advocates into having an I don't know how many decade-long debate over whether climate change was person-made or not. So 97 out of 100 climate scientists have studied the longitudinal data and determined, that 97 out of 100 scientists thing that like everyone liked to tout? When we would show that to people in focus groups, do you know what they would say?
What about the other 3?
They would say, oh, so there's still doubt.
Yeah.
You're basically doing advertising for the 3% kooks.
Yeah.
You're admitting to people that like there's still some ambiguity here. But worse than that, you're having a conversation about whether or not climate change is person made. And what I tell people all the time is like, look, I'm not your science teacher. Like, I don't actually care. I don't care if you understand that climate change is a product, or at least accelerated climate change is a product of human behavior. All I care is that you take the actions I need you to take. And if you take those actions and you are delusional about why, that's a problem between like you and your science teacher, your mom. I don't know, but it's not my problem, at least not as an advocate.
Yeah.
So advocates took that bait and they were in this endless conversation about like, it is person made and we're going to prove it to you. It's not person made. And all of that time was time wasted when they could have been saying a clean energy future is ours for the taking. We can have clean energy made at our house, by our door, jobs that no one can outsource ever, power our lives by the wind and the sun. And anyone who tells you differently is trying to poison your air and pad their pockets. And instead of talking about that, instead of selling the solution, saying what we were for, we spent all of this time admiring the problem. And the amount of time that the left likes to spend admiring problems, it's extraordinary.
It's a problem. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because when you describe the climate calculator, like carbon footprint calculator, I can see how someone very earnestly that wasn't the fossil fuel industry would be like, well, we want to activate people so that they will take an action. We don't necessarily know exactly what action we want them to take, but we want them to feel a sense of agency in a very large issue. And if they feel a sense of agency, they'll feel more committed. And then we can kind of like connect those people and that agency into something that rolls up into a bigger coalition or movement. And I can see what you're saying. I think the finger trap metaphor is a really good one, where it's like actually agency and empowerment for an individual in that way is actually a distraction from something else. And I feel like within the AI conversation, I mean, I'm curious if you have immediate ideas about what that more positive vision is, when it feels like all of the directions or all of the possible projections of the future that don't include AI as a central component to it is immediately slide tackled as like naive or like not like, what are you talking about? Of course, our future is going to be more technological in some way. And I feel like I at least find it challenging to make a positive message around this stuff that isn't something like, you know, wouldn't it be amazing if we had time to spend with our friends and family and actually like could touch grass and actually like weren't being like constantly exploited and like not even talk about AI, like have it be much more of a positive political vision of a more connected world that is not disintermediated by these companies. But I don't know. I mean, do you immediately have messaging that you would imagine we should be thinking about?
Yeah. Messaging is only as good or as bad as the task that you set out for it. And this is where a lot of things fall apart across issue areas. And I would guess that AI is one of the hardest, like genuinely. So I'm not saying what I'm about to say is easy, but a message can't be evaluated in some sort of empty space.
Yeah.
A message is, did it make people believe what I need them to believe and do what I need them to do?
I love how instrumental you are about this.
Oh, I mean, I'm a very practical human being.
I'm into it.
And so when I do projects with clients, those are the two questions that we ask at the outset of the project. We say, what do you wish people believed? And then what do you need people to do? And normally they can't answer.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
Right. So
interesting.
I can't answer for you. Number one, because like I don't possess the expertise to answer. And also because I'm not a policy person. I mean, the purpose of messaging is to put the most attractive possible wrapping paper on the box. But there has to be a box. Like there has to be a set of directives. And so let's say, for example, I know this isn't AI, but like in campaigns that I have worked on to do regulation of big tech in other ways that are, I think, adjacent, right? So controls over social media or controls over, for example, how police can access kind of public camera footage. I'm thinking this is principally in the EU because like they have, and in Brazil, there's been at least attempts and some actual regulation. And so in those situations, messages that we've experimented with that have done really well, like I'm not going to remember it verbatim, but there was one around social that was like your aunt's favorite recipe, your kid's first, like, you know, first place finish in swimming, your best friend's drawing. These are the memories that we share. These are the things that draw us online onto social media platform for connections. But today, a handful of corporations are stealing our moments and our memories. They're stealing our genuine desire to connect with each other in order to create profits and be able to invade our privacy and sell our data back to the highest bidder. We need to make our memories and our moments our own by, passing whatever this like European Regulatory Act.
Yeah.
But that's because there's like a campaign, there's a theory of change. And so in the absence of that, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's the speculative aspect of the narrative from industry that I find most flummoxing because to have a box with something inside that you put a nice wrapper around, like to have a policy prescription, it has to be on a terrain of specificity.
Yeah.
And I think there's something extremely skilled about shifting the conversation to the near future in a way that makes it extremely difficult to make positive statements. So I can imagine lots of negative statements. For example, I don't want a local community who does not want a data center in their backyard to be forced to have a data center in their backyard.
Yeah.
I don't want local government officials to be bought out to have industry take water, take energy. And I don't want another kid in Memphis to have asthma because Elon Musk can't bother to get regulatory permits and wait for Grok to be on the grid. Like there are a lot of in it, but it feels like a negative posture still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so to be clear, like say what you're for is the opening edict. I hope it's also clear that that's not enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Another really, really common messaging mistake and another rule, therefore, that we preach is people do things. So another common mistake in left-wing messaging is that everything appears to be a problem out of the ether. So wages are falling. Democracy is eroding.
That passive voice.
The wealth gap is growing. Harms are increasing.
Yeah.
I often say that I could write progressive messaging out. I could go through progressive websites and write passages out of the passive voice every single day of my life and be fully employed forever and ever and ever. And a big, huge part of that is the way that we're funded and C3 and fear and, academic ease and the fact that there are too many lawyers writing things which they have no business writing. And so rule number 2, yes, rule number 1 is say what you're for, paint that thing that people want to be involved in, attract people to your cause. But then rule number 2 is if people don't understand that a problem is person made, it is inconsistent to believe that it could be person fixed. So we're not out here trying to ask for regulations about the tides. Like I'm not trying to call, my senator to be like, hey, I was thinking of taking my kid to the tide pools. Like, could it please be low tide at 10 a.m.? Thanks, bye. Because that makes me sound like a lunatic. And that is back to the problem of climate change. Ironically, in this battle to make people understand that climate change is person-made, the discourse came to personify climate change. So climate change is raising sea levels. Climate change is making weather more dangerous. Climate change is raising, temperatures. You can't actually pass along climate change. You can't go to climate change's house and be like,
how dare you?
Right. You can't do a social media storm at climate change.
Yeah.
So there's no organizing theory behind that. So back to AI and big tech and so on, the way that we preach it is values, villain, vision. That's our message order. That's like all the components. So it's not just purely say what you're for. It's also be very clear. So the way that I would do it is we all want to have more moments, more memories, more time with our kids, to be able to touch grass, to have a life, to make a good living and have time left over to have a nice life. Yeah, we want to put food on the table and we want to be home in time to eat it. It'd be great if it tasted good too. But today, Elon Musk or but today,
Yeah.
whomever want to take everything from us and poison our communities
Mm.
to pad their own profits.
Yeah.
Having our children need universal inhalers is a choice we don't need to keep making. We can decide where our power in our communities goes, and we can reject these data centers that want to take from us in order to destroy us. So it's like, here's the
Yeah.
world we want. Here's what we want. Here's how we'd like our life to be. We want clean, locally made energy, and we want it to power our schools. We want it to, create the kinds of experiences and jobs and so on that are in our communities. And then there are these assholes who want to do something else, and we're not going to let them.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. So one of the reasons I'm asking these questions is because in a few weeks from us recording this conversation, there is a film that is premiering. It's actually already premiered at Sundance that does an exceptional job of narratively constructing this emphasis on near-term speculative stuff, whether it's AI is going to cure cancer or it's AI is going to kill us all. It is an extremely effective piece of propaganda that essentially unmoors the entire conversation away from these more concrete human concerns, human needs, and into some like fantasy space that is emotive. Like I think people watching this film will feel an emotional reaction to it. It's an emotional reaction that I think cannot be channeled towards any specific action towards companies that are responsible for the harms today and the harms that probably will accrue. And
Is
so
it is
yeah.
it called An Inconvenient Truth?
Say more. Yeah. It is not. It's called the AI doc,
I
but say
mean,
more. Yeah.
again, I'm showing my age, but like, and maybe I'm too wedded to this pattern recognition. I am, trained in social
We're
science,
talking
which
about
is
AI, so lean in, machine
pattern
learning, go for
recognition,
it. Yeah.
where I'm the machine.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, there was a documentary about climate change. Some of us remember
Yep.
that
Former Vice
was,
President Al Gore. Yeah.
yeah, that in many ways was really important, like credit where due. And, I'm relying upon a very old memory. So maybe I should
Yeah.
rewatch this thing and see how it holds up. But I mean, I do remember that there was an analogy drawn in it because Al Gore had grown up on a tobacco farm. That's what I remember of it. And him talking about how one day we will look back on these choices the way that we looked back on cigarettes. And,
Interesting.
just as these cigarette makers knew and, information revealed that like they knew how addictive nicotine was, they knew how, there was tar and other carcinogenic substances in these cigarettes,
Yeah.
but they just like sold it very sexy. I mean, the Marlboro man is not different than like the dude in the black turtleneck with like the weird earpiece thing that you were talking about at the outset. He just was like the original version of like how cool and sexy this thing was and how, you get to have a horse. That was like instead of getting to have like that
And a hat.
Cybertruck. Yeah, you get like now you get a Cybertruck and back then you got a horse and that was like the same thing, I guess. Anyway, maybe I'm misremembering or being uncharitable to An Inconvenient Truth, but again, like a movie that was like, this is a really big problem. This is a really big problem. This is like a really big deal. It's gonna be horrendous and terrible, like spoiler alert, true. But at least my recollection, and maybe this isn't the fault of the movie, maybe the movie did this, but regardless, there wasn't a movement out of it to actually take on big oil, to actually contest for power. Because ultimately, all of these problems are the same problem, which is too much wealth concentrated in too few hands. That is every problem we've ever had.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting on the big oil front. I think the difference between that film and this film that feels really important is that that was based on facts
Yes.
and information that we knew to be true, and it was an attempt to have a broader public understand the facts and the trajectory of like the direction of travel, whereas this feels like an attempt to create an artificial sense of trajectory in a way that both gives more life to industry centrality of this future vision that is going to come about, we promise, or we caution in this very speculative way, in a way that kind of, I don't know, it like sucks all the oxygen out of the room to get more specific. There are a few people in the film that are wonderful experts and academics that have spent their entire lives trying to better understand what's coming and what is here and now. And like being the nerd that's like, no, AI can't do that. And no, AI will never be able to do that. No, these are not worthwhile technologies for us to continue to invest in. It comes across as like a negative posturing, or like I don't know, the like hand-wringing leftist academic that's like complaining about something when industry's over there innovating and you just can't understand and you should like be quiet. And I don't quite know how to grapple with that speculativeness of this, like the
Yeah.
lack of, and then also this very effective kind of way that it forces the actual factual knowledgeable people into a box, because it's like, oh, you're not speculating, which means you're kind of behind the curve in a certain way.
Yeah. I mean, the way to do that is, this is going to sound like a digression, but I promise it's not. So when we are trapped in a conversation about tough on crime,
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
and it is obvious and normal and understandable that human beings are concerned about their safety. That is normal. It is a natural response to want yourself to be safe. It's a natural response to want your family to be safe. That's very low on Maslow's hierarchy. That does not like make you a weirdo, outlier, bad person. And so forever and ever and ever, not just in the United States, but in many countries, center-left parties and left-wing movements have been baited into this impossible conversation where the right is like, tough on crime, we're going to be tough on crime, and we're going to be more draconian, and we're going to, build more prisons, and we're going to increase penalties, and we're going to sort of incarcerate more people and punish more and have more police, and you need more police, and you need more police.
Because we're going to keep you safe.
Because we're going to keep you safe. And the population has been led to understand that more police equal more safety, when in fact we all know that like the safest neighborhoods in any country are the ones that have no police in them, right? The higher up into the hills that you get, the fewer police that you will see. And those are the neighborhoods where like nothing is going on, at least crime-wise. Well, there's plenty of crime going on. It's just going on inside, like by...
Totally.
So instead of engaging in this, like, we're going to be tough on crime, they're going to be tough on crime, we're going to out tough, or the way that you deal with crime is whatever, which you cannot win because you basically agreed to have the other side's argument, then what we have found actually works is talking about, let's get serious about safety. Because people's underlying psychological desire in this case is for safety, which is a normal desire. So, for example, in Minnesota, after the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Mattering resurgence in the summer of 2020, and crime and safety and protest on people's mind, the Republicans in the state went like whole hog, as they always do, talking about how Tim Walz owes an apology to suburban women, which is a dog whistle for white women. Suburban moms, excuse me. And instead of being like, no, there isn't crime in the cities, or no, there isn't serious crime, or, protests are fine, we created an entire campaign saying, I'm a suburban mom. And what I'm serious about is safety. And I know what keeps us safe. It's living in communities where we look after each other. I know what keeps us safe. It's having the people sworn to serve and protect us act in our interest and treat us all as equals. I know what keeps us safe. It's having services so that a really bad day doesn't turn into an epic disaster, and so on. So in this case, what I would say is that academic, they're being pitted against this like dude in a black turtleneck with the like weird microphone thing.
Pretty almost on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, I do live in the Bay. Like, I have to see them at bars and stuff. Like, it's one of the most repugnant aspects of my life. No, that's not true. I live in fascism. It's like it's like the funny repugnant aspect.
Okay.
Yeah, the fashion.
Less threatening one. Yeah.
I mean, I don't
Maybe
know. It's
not.
pretty
It's true.
threatening.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell,
Yeah.
really. Not directly, not like to my physical form, I guess. So instead of saying, it's not going to do this thing, it's not going to work this way, it's not going to work that way, depending on what the topic is, what you could say instead about the same thing is like, look, we live in a society in which we want to do things. We want to innovate. We want to be able to look at diseases that have plagued us and that are extraordinarily difficult to manage, like cancer. And we want to figure out, is there a better way? Is there a better response? Is there a better answer? And that's what we're seeking. And it turns out in some of these cases, there is. And that answer is you have to be able to have readily accessible healthcare so that you can have screenings and so that you can have genetic testing, so you can plan ahead and not get to stage 4. Another thing that we have to confront as a society, we want to be able to innovate. We want to be able to solve our problems. And seemingly, one of our biggest problems is very, very powerful white men having absolute terror about death and wanting to make themselves live infinitely. And so we need to innovate and we need to figure out how we become a society that understands that humans are mammals. And just as we are born, we shall also die. And we, it turns out, need to help people come to terms with the life cycle. That's how we need to innovate.
I love the passive aggression in that last one.
I
That's really
mean,
good. I'm into
could you
it.
tell?
I'm
I thought I
into it.
was.
I'm into it.
Thought it was stealth. I thought I was being stealth.
No, I'm into it. I really like that. I also like but the example with I'm a suburban mom and I want to be safe.
I know how to be safe.
I know how to be safe. In that case, what was, because you're also making me realize that when you say it needs to be obvious and specific what you want the person to do based on the belief that you help them arrive at, that it doesn't have to be, this is a specific regulatory action that I want taken. It can also be, I don't want regulatory action or policies written that result in part of the city budget going to a new prison. Like
Exactly.
it can be an I don't want, not
Absolutely.
just it's interesting.
But again, what you want to do is figure out what is the underlying psychological need.
Mm-hmm.
It's basic cognitive behavioral therapy, right? You can't have a no without a yes. It's also basic parenting. And so you can't replace something with nothing.
Yeah.
And if you understand, oh, this is what's going on for people. What's going on for people is they do want better treatments, or they do want care to be less painful, or they do want, whatever it is. And, obviously some of these things that they want are like completely ridiculous because they want like a silicon sex robot. And so in that case, what you have to do is figure out what's underlying that. Like, what is the pathology there and how is our society going to treat it?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is there's a part in the film, which I really don't like talking about it too much because it's just not worth thinking about. But there's a part in the film where the director says something like, "Oh, so we could live in a disease-free world," or literally, I don't even have to do the second half of that. Yes, he literally said that when talking about the possibility for AI to support in drug discovery, and it's this extremely devoid statement where you're like, no, wait, like right now, every minute a kid dies of malaria in Africa, and we have a vaccine. We have a vaccine for malaria.
Have you seen the outbreak of measles happening?
I know. But it's this ability of tech adjacent people to talk about positive futures in this way that is so devoid of critical thinking that like I don't even know where to begin. But that's a really interesting entry point as you were just describing that message. And I'm like, oh, you could arrive at the message of, we want to live in a world where people have access to quality healthcare. And when there's an innovation, we want it to be diffused in society so that everyone like I can imagine making it a much more tangible about physical reality argument and by juxtaposing it, make what they're saying look so stupid.
Yeah, and also let's not overlook the importance of ridicule. Like,
Yeah. Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
they don't want to have AI, they want to be AI.
Yeah.
Like, you want to be a robot. Like, you don't want to be George Jetson. You want to be, what's the name of the cleaning robot that they had in the Jetsons?
We don't remember. That's the thing.
Wow, this analogy was going to be so
Yeah, it was really
good.
gonna
And
be
now it's
good.
Rosie. Her name was Rosie.
Okay, you want to be Rosie.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to be Rosie.
I don't want to be
I'm
Rosie
not
either.
trying to be Rosie.
But it's so interesting, this like inhumane, like another sort of narrative arc that I think a lot about is the emphasis on humanity. So the word humanity gets used a lot when people talk about AI, or the fact that XAI until very recently was a public benefit corporation, as is Anthropic, a public benefit corporation, as is OpenAI, I think currently still legally incorporated as a nonprofit in California and is trying to negotiate their way out of it. But they've anchored into this idea that they're stewards of bringing about this new, better world. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about their personal reputations and like what the public expects from them and wants from them and like thinks about them. And I think the most recent example of that being Dario Amadei being held up as a hero in relation to him trying to sell his shitty products to the Department of War to kill people and knowingly selling that to an increasingly illegally operating executive branch. And then the sort of public consciousness around it is quit ChatGPT, sign up for Claude because it's like the better one, even though they're all just like terrible. And while I think there's this need to have a vision to help people see so that you can activate larger and larger groups of people to motivate better policy and motivate, better regulation, I still feel like there's this general vibe around these people that I would love to hear your take on, like, what types of messaging, and maybe it's ridicule, maybe it's other sort of forms of creating alternative spaces that people can step into where they see what actual good looks like. But like, what do you think we do about this hero complex tech bro like savior thing around Musk, around Amadei, around Altman, around all these dudes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one potential way of approaching it is to turn them into cartoon villains, that they're the Lex Luthor of it all and other kind of iconic, very technology obsessed. I mean, there's a lot of that
It's
in
true.
Western
Yeah.
literature and especially in kind of superhero, they often like live in some weird and there's obviously like technology fetish among the people that are revered as heroes
Yeah, it's
too.
true.
Those
Yeah.
like Batman's very
Yeah.
interesting. Now we're like, next you're gonna ask me about sports, or next I'm gonna try to produce a sports analogy, which I'm going,
I would
which I
never.
like am only slight. I mean, this like Marvel attempt at mine, like
You're doing great.
yeah, like I know
Yeah.
nothing about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I know less about sports, so like I'm now on.
But like
dangerous
Iron
ground.
Man, is like actually partly inspired by Musk, like as a character. And I think that that's a really great example of where that type of iconography almost, or like narrative architecture, has been used in that way to support and like uplift the sense that they're heroes. Yeah.
So I think, one
Don't do
option,
that.
don't do that. One option is like to turn that on its head and make them be these like weird robot villain, non-human, like incapable of kind of real connection and emotion. And that, like I said before, they don't want to have AI, they want to be AI. Like they want to exit humanity in
Yeah.
like entirely. And we couldn't possibly have them making decisions about our lives because
They're not on our team.
right, they're not on our team. So that's kind of like would be one narrative attempt I would make. Another narrative attempt I would make is every single technology, not every, but like a lot of technologies can either be used for good or for ill. It depends like what you want to do with them. The printing press can print Mein Kampf, or it can print like Maya Angelou. Like it just you can do different things with the same technology, and some of them are like very evil and some of them are like extraordinarily important contributions to like humanity and thought and so on. And so the question is really around power. You come back, I said earlier I was talking about the production of cars, right? Henry Ford famous bad guy, used at that point a very new technology of kind of the way that he innovated. It was a huge innovation, the way that they did the assembly line and not having like a single employee
Mhm.
make all aspects of a car, but rather like each person is kind of hyper specialized in their little micro task. And that just like makes the car assembly so much faster. Taylorism, it's called. And that allowed the production of cars much more readily, much more cheaply, and so then people could buy cars and so on. But it also, without worker power, and I mean, you want to talk about a specific case, like if you look at Detroit just as a single city, Detroit used to be the United States' third most populous city.
Oh my god.
Yes.
What a
Detroit
stat.
is
Wow.
where Motown happened.
Yeah.
Detroit has some of the most legendarily gorgeous architecture, Art Deco. Detroit had a thriving, incredible black middle class. Detroit was the shit. It is again, like, I love Detroit. I'm from Wisconsin, so for me to admit this about a Michigan city, it must be true. I must really care. And when workers in the auto industry had worker power, could be organized, were organized in unions and were able to negotiate a fair return on their work, like that was really important and significant.
Mhm.
And I'm not trying to say we've ever had that as like some sort of nirvana, but a lot of this boils down to, does labor have enough collective power
Mhm.
that it can actually do something about capital?
Mhm.
And again, these are all questions of power. And so it's really, who is this technology going to benefit? Who's going to be in charge? Who's
Mhm.
going to make decisions about it? And what will it be used for? Will it be used to further enrich truly a handful of people so they can purchase themselves politicians and create what we have now, which is a MAGA murder regime that is abducting, assaulting, and came into power doing it and continues. Like, there's a through line between Epstein, ICE, and the war on Iran. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. And are we going to empower this handful of people to be this MAGA murder regime, at least here domestically? Or will we decide that it's our choices that determine what comes next and organize collectively that we get to be in charge of the thing?
Yeah. I really, really like that as a frame. And I think that it connects to some of the um also some aspects of Luddism. And I think the Taylorism metaphor is really interesting, and also the effect over time on when an industry gets an advantage over workers, what happens.
Mhm.
And also what happens when we make presumptions about industrial policy in this country, about the economic future of a particular area based on a single industry, is also, I feel like, quite interesting for thinking about in terms of AI, because it does feel like this overconcentration on valuation of these companies inside our overall economy is a huge vulnerability that we are not dealing with at all. And I think that there's a systemic risk here that is quite scary. And I think if the bubble does burst, it's going to affect everyday people. It's going to affect pensions. It's going to affect very like people that are exposed. Everyone's exposed to the risk, but they're not actually getting any of the benefit. And I think that that's a real I don't know, that's just like a really powerful comparison. So there was another film that premiered at Sundance called Ghost in the Machine, and the director, Valerie Veach, it's a documentary about the history of eugenics and how AI is essentially a direct descendant of eugenics. It's not an affiliate. It's like it came from, AI has come from eugenics. And she and I have been having conversations over the last few weeks about the power for an artist or a filmmaker within this current moment to say that they're not gonna use AI, and then the way that that is so triggering because of the dominant narrative around these things, but also the way that um, it both brings about for an individual that says, "No," this sense of agency in a moment that can feel quite abstract and overwhelming, but I wonder how much it's also this finger trap of, like, what can you do as an individual, and, like, gets us out of the structural piece. So any thoughts on, like, how refusal in this moment Like, is it a political dead end because it makes it seem like you're not being real and you're being naive about where things are going and like no one's going to listen because of da 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 da? Or is it an important signal to build a bigger base of power around some of these concerns and questions?
Well, first, because I'm me, I'm gonna reframe it.
Great.
It's a right of refusal, but it is also a freedom of creation. What she is claiming is her own freedom to create things by humans for humans. That she wants to create things that are made by humans for humans. And so first there's like the affirmation of what you are doing and what you are for. And I'm going to share a personal-ish story. So I have 2 kids. My older kid just started university. And both in high school and in university, he is absolutely adamantly against any form of AI. And in fact, when he has had like assignments, because sometimes teachers will assign things that like include AI components, it makes him furious. Like he doesn't want anything to do with it. And obviously there's a ton going on, I think everybody knows with like kids just writing their essays and, doing all sorts of things with AI. And if you understand education, children, people, learners, I guess even when they're not children, as lamps to be lit and not vessels to be filled, and more importantly, lamps to be lit rather than assignments to be completed in order to get a degree, then you want to write your own essays because you want to learn things. You want to read things. You want to think about things. You want to process information. You want to analyze it. You want to come to interesting conclusions. And I understand that some people will say, well, you can use AI for that. Like you can use it to prompt and you can use it to spur along your thinking. And maybe you can and maybe you can't. I also don't do it. But I think when people are making choices, we have to frame them around what it is you're getting, not what it is you're refusing or what it is you're giving up. But this is my choice to have this come from me, to reflect not just my knowledge, but my elbow grease, not just my talents, but my perseverance, my frustrations, my writer's block, and the way that I powered through it. Because all of that is what creates a piece of work, whatever that work is, that I feel I can truly say is mine. And I can truly say exists in this world like no other. And I think that maybe I'm being naive, but the more that we have Mar-a-Lago face,
Oh god.
I keep taking you places that you are not
I was
expecting.
not expecting
Yeah,
that.
you're welcome. Maybe there should be a content warning on this
I feel
entire
like
thing.
maybe, yeah. We could put some filters on as well.
I mean,
but
you're
carry
gonna
on.
edit it,
Yeah.
You can take out.
Oh god, no, I'm not taking this out.
Okay.
Keep going. Mar-a-Lago phase.
Yeah, Mar-a-Lago face and like, you know, like heroin chic body, which is coming back in, and kind of just homogeneity. This is my like way of saying homogeneity across different things. My hope is that there's going to be a rebellion.
Yeah.
Because when things are processed off of, LLMs, like you're regressing to the mean and eventually everyone's going to have the same essay.
Yeah.
And I understand you've like taught the thing to think like you and whatever, like I kind of call bullshit on that. So there are going to be some people, and it's interesting that in movements of art and in movements of, and I say art broadly speaking, like when we look at sort of innovations in music and the way that that has shifted over time, from like moving from Baroque to Romanticism to classical to like modern, moments of innovation in different kinds of art forms have come when an art form is so calcified that there becomes like a level of homogeneity to it. And then someone gets pissed off about that or annoyed or whatever, and they're like, I don't want to be a cubist anymore. I don't want to be an impressionist anymore. I don't want to be a modernist anymore, be a postmodernist. And maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe what's going to happen is
Yeah.
that people are going to be pissed off about Mar-a-Lago face and they're going to stop Botoxing. I don't know.
Yeah. So the aesthetics of it is really interesting. And I think also watching, I don't know, watching like Mark Zuckerberg learn how to do like martial arts or watching and put his little stupid gold chain
They're
on or like
all
Jeff
becoming
Bezos.
the
Yeah.
same person. Like they really are becoming the same person, the way that they look, the way that they talk, the things that they do. And that's boring.
Yeah.
Like it's just boring.
Yeah.
And I guess this isn't a lot to hang my hat on, but like I just boring.
Boring doesn't win.
I don't think people want boring.
Yeah.
The problem is that when the only other option besides boring, and to be clear, like I don't mean to make light about planetary destruction. Like I understand that
Yeah.
this is more than boring. Like it's
Yeah.
real bad. And I'm not trying to say it isn't. But aesthetically, like they suck. They're like
Yeah.
weird and uninteresting and like tiresome and so on. Careless people, as the book said, and as we learned
It's a
from
really
Great
good book
Gatsby.
title. Yeah.
I don't think people want to be boring and I don't think they want to live in boring. And
Yeah.
that's why we have to give people another option. And that other option cannot be,
Yeah.
that other option. I mean, again, if you want people to come to your party, throw a better party. Like, if it isn't AI, then what is it? And like, how is it a really nice time?
Thank you so much. This has
Sure.
been a wild,
The-
surprising journey.
The only person who's going to bring up Mar-a-Lago face in these conversations.